today we're going to talk about the shifting landscape of finance, and we're going to review some of the survey results, as well as some commentary on some of the highs and the lows. We're going to go through our methodology, demographics of the survey, and discuss some of the priorities related to technical accounting, including a little bit on the new lease accounting regulations. So from a methodology and demographic standpoint, so Protiviti issued a survey middle of last year, and we received about 400 responses across various cross-section of companies of various sizes and of various roles within those organizations. And just to kind of give you some background, and this might make sense of why some of the responses are the way they are. Predominantly, we receive responses from finance management and leadership, particularly the Chief Financial Officer, the VP of Finance, and the Corporate Controller. That makes up probably about 50% of the responses. The other 50%, come from the staff and people that are kind of going through these things and doing the actual legwork, as well as those that are charged with governance. This just shows a split, and the split's fairly even amongst companies of various sizes. And we actually got a very good survey result out of this. About half of the individuals taking the survey were a certified public accountant or a certified management accountant. The other half had no certification or chose not to disclose the certification. About 45% of the responses came from public entities. The remaining 55% came from private entities, of which 10% came from nonprofits, 7% from government, and 4% from education. From a priority standpoint, shift ahead here for time. One of the big call-outs is security and privacy of data was a huge priority amongst everybody. So 75% of the VPs of finance and CFOs thought it was the top priority, as well as 60-something% of the other folks taking the survey. And it's actually no surprise that this is the highest priority. Given the volume, complexity, and sensitivity of data that finance groups must manage and secure, these challenges are compounded as more financial data warehouses move to the cloud, which introduce a broad range of new security risks and opportunities. One of the key areas that CFOs and finance leaderships continue to struggle with is data quality. As things get more high-tech and in the cloud, as well as the influence of automation and RPA, data quality becomes a major concern and is actually critical, and so is data governance. One of the other areas that we saw that was a little bit of a surprise was process improvement, particularly around data analytics. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. We saw this as a surprise because in prior years we've typically seen process improvement as a higher priority, but this was mostly surrounding SOX and actually kind of the nuts and bolts of compliance and running operationally accounting departments. From a low priority standpoint, virtual currencies was a hot topic in the past 2 years. This is a topic that's not really a concern at the moment of CFOs and finance organizations, blockchain as well. And this might be something that we think is going to move. I think as we go in and do the 2019 surveys, we expect that these might become more of a higher priority, especially as technology continues to progress and automation and RPA becomes more prevalent. So from a data standpoint, we're going to do a little bit of a dive into the top three priorities. It's actually no surprise that security and privacy, data analytics, and as well as the process improvements around data analytics are the top three. Some of the key considerations to think about is, what data is most sensitive, who has access to what for their job, what regulatory requirements do I have, and who manages those risks, as well as, do we have the right skill set and the right tools to be able to harness the data effectively and actually have meaningful analytics. And then from a process side, what we're seeing is how can companies benchmark these tools and really look and see, where is the revenue leakage, where is training needed, and how do I measure the effectiveness of the process changes that are being put in place. From anyone who's gone through these types of security and privacy initiatives, a lot of these fundamentals up here should be no surprise. Understanding risk management and regulatory reporting, as well as a focus on regulatory compliance. These have always been hot topics. Data privacy and protection. Who has access to the sensitive data and why? From a blocking and tackling perspective, understanding where the data assets are, where they reside, what are the business and technical definitions, maybe in order to help classify them for security purposes, and really putting controls around master data management and understanding, what are the risks around vendor master files and customer master files, and making sure that those controls surrounding those are mitigating the risks and are operating effectively. From an actionable data governance side, data ownership is a key factor, and if everyone's responsible for data assets, then really no one's responsible. So this is more of a kind of a shift in mindset that everyone's a data defender and everybody's responsible for data, as well as data lineage, understanding the systems, how are all these systems talking to each other, making sure that they're secure transfers, as well as the classification and who has access. From a data analytics standpoint, I think the biggest thing here is to managing the flood of data that's coming in. So as we continue to evolve, things are in the cloud. People are bombarded with information and data, and it's really harnessing that data and making sure it's fit for purpose. So as all this data is coming in, or companies really taking it and turning it into meaningful information that then finance leadership can use to take action and to unlock some value. From a process improvement side, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is data mining and adding some visualization to all these great technological initiatives that are going on. I think having dashboards like are up there help to understand the process and analytics, and can help inform people making decisions. So one of the sources that we're seeing is people are mining their ERP and other systems to come up with operational data points so that they can visualize and really make sure that the things that they're putting in place are actually working. We're seeing companies actively monitor these things and support their risk assessment activities with such dashboards. From a finance The largest focus that we've seen and the highest priority has been around financial planning and analysis, as well as strategic planning and profitability reporting. You know, as we mentioned before, that you know, CFOs and financial leaders are facing a ton of challenges and demands. Previously, you know, a few years back, their primary focus was financial reporting results and ensuring the accuracy of financial statements, as well as making sure that the organization complies with Sarbanes-Oxley and other regulations. These responsibilities have kind of evolved into something that's just, I don't want to say take it for granted, but something that's just a normal part of their job and is the minimum of their requirements. And now, you know, CFOs are more forward-looking, have less retrospective view, and are less focused on financial results, and are, you know, are more focused on real-time insights about the finance organization's products and services, what is profitable, what products and services are the best performers, in which markets they can increase profitability. So what we're seeing here is the trend is to really harness a lot of the data and security initiatives that were on or priorities that were on the other slides, and really take that data and turn it into information that they can then use to be more forward-looking with how they're managing the business. From a low priority standpoint, and not to say these are low priorities, but these go back to what the things that are given. You know, we're seeing order to cash, external reporting, procure to pay. You know, these are the real operational stuff that you know, I think most CFOs and most finance organizations have. You know, are more mature and they don't require as big of a focus on. But on the day-to-day, these are still, you know, a focus for them because they have, their department has to operate. So low priority from the survey, but definitely really still important. This is just a visualization that kind of you know, connects the dots and how data technology is managing all these processes and sub-processes. You know, and it's really the point here is data is really the key of this, and harnessing that data and those analytics to really make you know, business decisions at the right cost. As we move through the survey, it's you know, no surprise to find leadership along with recruiting and retaining talent as a top priority. You know, there's a growing need for finance leaderships that can help guide the finance organization in the use of data analytics and RPA technology. You know, currently there's a ton of demand for individuals that can create these things and can harness that data and make these meaningful predictive analytics. There's also a great challenge is to keeping these individuals within the organization. So we're seeing you know, a lot of turnover in this, and it's we're seeing organizations struggle with retaining the top talent. I think lower on the priority scale is the you know, the real soft skills, continuous improvement, coaching and mentoring. You know, these kind of fall into, these are the baseline requirements. These are things that an organization continues to do. It's just not everybody's focus at the moment. So, and as we move into finance-related technical areas and lease accounting, you know, the survey really focuses on a few topics. IT accounting, and it was pretty much dominated by IT accounting and finance. The next topic that we're seeing, which was a high priority, is domestic and international tax planning and forecasting. This one comes as no surprise, given the tax laws that went into effect late 2017 and 2018. You know, this continues to be a high area of focus for many organizations. SEC reporting is always up there. Really hasn't moved from a priority standpoint. We're seeing the readiness for adopting new standards and accounting pronouncements. And you know, this one's interesting. So if you look at the dark blue is the CFO and the finance leadership, and the light blue is kind of everyone else. And I always find this funny that the people that are actually doing the day-to-day and implementing the new standards have this as a higher priority than the CFOs do. I think they're a little bit shielded from it, and they think it's important, but you know, unless you've actually kind of gone through one of these, you really understand how much work is actually involved in adopting one of these standards. Sarbanes-Oxley is very similar in disclosure, and stock-based comp, no surprises. You know, the market continues to fluctuate, stock-based compensation, and it continues to be an area of focus. Conversely, from the lower priorities, and you know, this is almost the actual inverse of what we saw on the other side with the CFO and all others. The results are actually flipped. You know, it's no surprise with these. This, you know, these metrics here on the new lease accounting standard, we're doing is trying to gauge the potential impact of the standard over the next 12 months. And, you know, while organizations said that they would increase their 2018 financial budget, or the financial budget has increased, we're not seeing it as great as we thought it would be. I think part of this has to do with, you know, kind of the sandwiching of two very big standards back to back. So 2017 into 2018, we had the revenue recognition standard, and now 2018 into 2019, we have lease accounting. So as budgets did increase, I think we're just not seeing the change go from, you know, from year to year. So I think organizations continue to run very high, and the CFOs are asking a lot of their teams and their organizations. So with lease accounting, and I just wanted to spend a few minutes on it, this has been an area of my focus for the past, actually the past 12 to 18 months. And you know, what we're seeing, and I'm going to share some lessons learned with some people that have successfully implemented and transitioned to it. You know, the approach that we're seeing best is a structured approach. We're seeing a lot of success with our clients that, you know, are taking seriously, and, you know, really doing the planning and laying the groundwork for it. You know, starting with the analysis, you know, establishing a steering committee, performing the assessment, you know, and with this, you know, it's really assessing the completeness of their population, and really knowing where their leases are, where there could potentially be embedded leases. You know, having the folks that are harnessing the data that we talked about, you know, earlier, and you know, really looking for those recurrent payments, so that you know, the appropriate amount of testing can be done on the population, and so that everything is you know, identified. From a transition strategy perspective, you know, it's taking what we're seeing in the earlier phases, and you know, depending on the size of the inventory, going out and putting a system in, and being able to manage the data and have it secure and really function the way that you need it to function. And we're seeing this more with our clients that have hundreds or even thousands of leases, where the need for a system to be able to manage you know, the payments and the, you know, establishing the right of use asset and lease liability, having it all reconciled, having all the data together, it becomes absolutely critical. You know, as well as the project management over such an implementation. You know, and you know, lastly, we're seeing you know, the clients that are updating the critical accounting policies and procedures as they go, and not trying to go out and come up with positions right off the get-go, but really doing the assessment, understanding what they have, putting systems in place, you know, assessing the transition controls, and then really developing what their policy should look like, and then molding their procedures after some of these new systems that are being put in place. We found our clients to be very successful in doing this. Some of the best practices that we're seeing for the new standard, as I mentioned before, you want to ensure that the lease inventory is complete and reliable. One of the ways to do this is to start with the minimum lease payment disclosure footnote, and kind of have that as a starting point, but then also to really look for payments and look for recurrent payments and understanding what's there, and really abstracting and not just relying on data that's already sitting in a spreadsheet, but going back to the leases, making sure you have the latest amendment, making sure everything's correct. And I think this is a great opportunity for companies to do that. And a lot of our clients are really taking that seriously and looking at every single lease and touching every piece of paper. Really again, and evaluating the supporting systems and data, making sure that what you do for transition, ultimately becomes sustainable on the go forward. We've had clients where they default to Excel and they want everything to be in Excel, and you could do that for 50 leases, but as we've kind of gone through the process with them and seen the lease inventory kind of grow rapidly, and they're at about 200 leases now, the need for systems and support for that data becomes critical. So it's definitely something you should try to think about at the get-go, and really be honest with what the inventory looks like. The third topic is looking for embedded leases. We've had some clients that have really not done a great job with this, and then they get called out from their auditors. So what we're seeing is individuals are using, and external auditors and internal auditors are testing recurring payments, where not every recurring payment is an embedded lease, but embedded leases are most likely associated with the recurring payments. So actually going in and testing recurring payments and coming up with an approach to identify them, and then taking the next step and diving into what those service agreements look like and evaluating them for right-of-use assets is critical. The next piece of this is reviewing the terms of existing finance obligations, with assets and liabilities coming onto the books, especially with current assets and liabilities coming on as these leases mature. It's important to to understand the existing finance obligations that you have. Make sure that you've reviewed the debt agreements and ensure that nothing's going to trip by adopting the standard. The next one is it goes about to in the planning stages where you want to make sure all the right people are in the room and all the right people are involved with such a change. What we've been seeing is having the finance team involved, but then also representation from AP, fixed assets, legal, procurement, really anyone that can enter into a lease, establishing those lines of communication so that when the new process is put in place, it's not a surprise to everybody that these changes need to happen. With the new standard comes a lot of disclosure. With this, it's really making sure that whatever system goes in place is going to be there to support the disclosure from a transition standpoint, but also on a go-forward basis. So there's a lot of really key things that we've seen and a lot of lessons learned from this process. One of the ones that's not up here is talk with the external auditor, have them involved in this process. As we look back, you should have a checkpoint with them at each of those 3 phases, whether it's planning, making sure that they're on board with the approach, putting the system in place, making sure they understand the types of changes that are going to happen. And then lastly, with the embedded stages, really making sure they're kind of in agreement with their positions. So, that's another one that's not up there, but it's definitely really important. I left a few minutes for some questions, and I realize we kind of covered a lot. So, any questions, please ask, or want to grab me afterwards, that's fine as well. All right, great. And with that, I'll introduce Paula. Sure. Thank you.